India and abroad. The Glasgow Climate Change Conference was held from 31st October to 13th November 2021. COP26 helped us reach a consensus on key actions to address climate changes. Countries talked about transparency in climate action plan. It is very enlightening to know how any organization can encash the carbon credits and how these points help in business growth and financing, especially for developing countries. We hope that this webinar will help our attendees know more about the changing business environment due to climate policy. We have amongst us SEPC CDC Head for the Environment Services, Sri Manish, who is our expert speaker on the topic. Mr. Dabkara is the CMD and CEO of EKI Energy Services Limited, the world's largest carbon credit developer and supplier. He founded enlightening International in the year 2008 with an objective to lead companies worldwide to a future of net zero carbon emissions. With a deep passion to contribute towards the betterment of planet Earth at its heart, enlightening International offers strategic services and solutions to organizations for their carbon asset management, including carbon credit generation, supply, and offsetting. Under Sri Dabkara's leadership, EKI Energy Services Limited has grown to become a catalyst for carbon offsets, not only within India, but globally, and has supplied over 100 million offsets as on date. Today, the company has over 2,500 clients across 40 countries globally. Mr. Dabkara, a subject matter expert in the field of energy, climate change, carbon, and quality management, is a certified energy auditor and manager under the Government of India's Bureau of Energy Efficiency. He also has certifications in quality and management from IIM Ahmedabad, IIM Indore, CII, GIZ, in addition to a master's in technology in energy and management. So without taking much time, so I hand over the session to Sri Dabkara. Would want to share the screen.
Yes, good morning. And I'm just starting to share my screen, just a minute. So it must be visible now, I think.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So good morning, everyone. This is Manish Dabkara from enlightening International. I'm leading environmental sector at Service Export Promotion Council. Directly coming over the topic, the climate change and global warming. So today I'm going to cover some basic information about the climate change and global warming, because various delegates may not be having clear information about what is global warming, how the global warming is happening, and what are the impacts of the global warming. Then after how the international community had started to reduce this global warming issue, or to mitigate the climate change that is happening on Earth through the formation of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, then formation of or adaptation of Kyoto Protocol, which is an international treaty to reduce the emissions, majorly focusing over the developed nations only, or developed economies only. And now we are into the Paris Agreement era. So in Paris Agreement era, all the nations, including India or other developing nations like China or various other nations, so they are responsible to reduce the global emissions. And what are the national determined contributions, how Indian government had submitted its national determined contributions, how if any delays will happen at the developing nation to adopt this impact of climate change, or to adopt climate carbon markets, for example, then what are the impacts that the exporters, Indian exporters, may face in reference to the international obligations that they may be having from European Union or from USA or from Canada, and similarly other developed economies. So we'll do cover all these topics starting from 0 up to you can say 100. So as you as you know, what are the greenhouse gases? So the greenhouse, there are various greenhouse gases, but there are only 7 greenhouse gases had been notified by United Nations. That is carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons, sulfur hexafluoride, nitrogen trifluoride. So these are the 7 greenhouse gases that United Nations had identified and notified that if this global warming issue or the climate change issue is happening because of these 7 greenhouse gases. Why we call them greenhouse gases? Because if you see at the right hand side, at the left hand side, natural greenhouse gas effect. During the daytime, sun used to send the solar radiations on Earth. All the solar radiations, once it touches to the surface of our Earth, now few of the heat radiations will get absorbed, and few of the heat radiations will get re-radiated heat will do come into the universe again, into the space again. But these greenhouse gases, they do absorb some heat during the daytime, and they will do re-radiate heat. If you see this arrow, re-radiated heat will do come back on the Earth when during the nighttime, when the Earth temperature is that means if these greenhouse gases will not be there, then the Earth temperature will be less than 0. That means it will come to the minus, and the survival of the human beings, plants, and other living beings, it will be very tough for the survival. So the greenhouse gases are very much important on the Earth, and these greenhouse gases is then creating greenhouse gas effect. But after industrialization, this, if you see at the right hand side, human enhanced greenhouse gas effect. So after industrialization, after 1970, year 1970, it had been after year 1970, it had been observed like the greenhouse gases in the form of CO2, methane, nitrous oxide. More and more greenhouse gases concentration had been added into the atmosphere, and so more and more heat is getting trapped within the atmosphere. And during the night time, more and more heat then will do get re-radiated, and so it is causing the temperature rise on Earth, and that is called as a global warming. And this global warming issue is creating various different concerns for the living beings on Earth. The most important one and the most critical one is the climate change. Because of this climate change, various effects are getting surfaced over the Earth, like sea level rise, change in crop pattern based on the time period during the year, then increase in the diseases, and various other food scarcity. Various other concerns are upcoming because of this climate change. So to limit this climate change, a Kyoto Protocol, or you can say before that Kyoto Protocol, during 1997, one body called as United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change had been constituted, and that UNFCCC, after getting too much negotiation and discussions within the nations at United Nations, they had adopted Kyoto Protocol. So Kyoto Protocol is an international. Why we call it as Kyoto Protocol? Because that particular treaty had happened at Kyoto, Japan during 1997, and it had entered during 2000. It had entered into the force during 2005. So actual carbon market started from year 2005, and under Kyoto Protocol, it had been described like all developed nations are responsible for this global warming, and they should reduce their emissions. If they are not able to do the same, then they are allowed to buy carbon credits, which are generated from developing nations. So what are carbon credits? Carbon credit is 1 ton CO2 emission reduction from the atmosphere. So if you do any activity, any business activity which helps to reduce any of these 7 greenhouse gases, you will be eligible to earn carbon credits, which is a kind of an environmental commodity, and it's tradable in the So, although in national market is not very much in place as of now, in developing nations, not only in India, but in all developing nations, it's not in place. In major developed nations also, it's not in place, like in Russia or in USA or in Canada. The nationwide carbon market is not there. The most famous, the national carbon market is there, which is existing for last, say, 15 years, 16 years, you can say, is the European Union emission trading scheme. So 1 ton CO2 emission reduction from the atmosphere, either you reduce it, either you sequester it. Focusing on these 7 greenhouse gases, you will be eligible to earn carbon credits. So under Kyoto Protocol is based on the principles and provisions of the convention and follows its annex-based structure. It only binds developed nations. No developing nations had target to reduce the emissions from year 2005 to 2020, and places a heavier burden on them under the principle of common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities, because it recognizes that they are largely responsible for the current high level of greenhouse gas emissions that had been added in the atmosphere. So Kyoto Protocol had been divided into two parts. So first part was first commitment period from year 2008 to 12. So if you do observe, this story had started from 1997, adopted during 2005. Actual implementation had happened during 2008. And up to 12, it was the first commitment period, and 37 industrialized countries, including European Union community, had set the target to reduce the emission. And what was the target? It was they have to reduce the emissions to 1990 level. So whatsoever the emissions, greenhouse gas emissions that they were doing during year 1990, they should reduce from the current level to 1990 level, and then reduce 5% less than the same. But the USA, United States of America, had not ratified this particular first commitment period, and so all developed nations they were focusing, or they were pressurizing that United Nations, which was at that time was the largest greenhouse gas emitter in the world. Now it is having second position after China, and India is having almost third or fourth position. So USA was not signing this particular treaty, and so Canada, Russia, Australia, New Zealand, and Japan, they had withdrawn from commitment period 2, starting from year 2013 and 2020. And so the carbon market had also, you can say, crashed. Earlier, the rates were floating in between, say, 10 to 25 euros, and thereafter it had reduced to less than 50 cents, or €1 or $1, you can say. So but in Doha, in Qatar, on 8 December 2012, the Doha Amendment of the Kyoto Protocol was adopted for the second commitment period, starting from 13 and will end at 2020. But this particular commitment period was not very much successful, because only European Union was the major developed nation which was complying with the reduction of the emissions and was buying the carbon offsets. But the other nations, they were not doing the same. After that, this is a present situation which had got this Paris Agreement on the surface. So as of now, we were there, say, no temperature rise. So we were there in the pre-industrial average. So the year 1970, you can consider. Now, during 2019, we have crossed 1 degree centigrade temperature. So it was very critical. And during 2015-16, only this Paris Agreement had been signed, which had got its enforcement from 1 January 2021. So now we are living in the Paris Agreement era. And each nation in the Paris Agreement era need to reduce its emissions, and they need to submit a document called as nationally determined contribution. So India has also submitted its nationally determined contribution during year 2015-16. And whatsoever the national determined contributions that had been submitted, so if no one would have submitted that particular document, then 3.3 degrees centigrade is the temperature rise that is going to happen by the end of the century. That is very sure. Whatsoever the national determined contributions that we have submitted, only zero point 0.3 degrees centigrade would be the temperature reduction that the Earth may see by the end of the century. But what we need under Paris Agreement, we should be able to um, limit, or we should be able to cap 1.5 degree centigrade temperature rise, and then after we have to make it again come to the 0 degree temperature level. And the upper limit that had been set under the Paris Agreement goal is 2 degrees centigrade. The temperature rise on our Earth should not be increased by more than 2 degrees centigrade. So this is the target of the Paris Agreement. And so the Paris Agreement, 196 nations, parties means nations, during Conference of Parties meeting number 21 at Paris. And why the Paris Agreement name had been given to this particular treaty? Because it had been done at the Paris during 2015, and it had entered into the force on 4th November 16. And 1.5 degrees centigrade, the goal is to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees centigrade, preferably 1.5 degrees centigrade compared to the pre-industrial levels. And to achieve this long-term temperature goal, countries aim to reach global peaking of greenhouse gases as soon as possible to achieve carbon neutral world by 2050. So various nations like European Union or USA or China or India, they had submitted its net zero targets. So India had submitted its net zero target by year 2070. Major developed nations that submitted during 2040, 2050. Our major economical rival, China, had given the target for 2060. Although these are the targets that had been given as of now, but as we'll do cross, for example, a decade or two, maybe Indian government or the other nations, they will do revise those targets so that they can align with the Paris Agreement target that had been signed by all the nations. Under Paris Agreement, again, if all the nations, they need to reduce the emissions, and if they are not able to do, they can buy carbon credits, similar to the period in Kyoto Protocol. So under Article 12 of Kyoto Protocol, all developed nations were allowed to buy carbon credits which were developed from the developing nation. And in Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, again, the similar thing had been adopted. If any nation would not be able to reduce the emissions by its own, because they may not be having resources, or they may be having the maximum best policies that can be done in the form of, say, carbon tax, or in the form of emission trading scheme, or in the form of creating more policies so that more and more low carbon technologies can be adopted. But if they are not able to do the same, they can buy the carbon credits which are generated from from any nation, now not only developing nation, but from any nation. And to operationalize this particular emission trading scheme, there are two articles that had been adopted, two sub articles, you can say. One is Article 6.2 and another one is Article 6.4. So under Article 6.2, any two nation can do MOU in the form of cooperative approaches. So here under Article 6.2, for our members, for the service exporters from India, we would be having very good opportunity to work. But before having the same, Indian government must be having some MOU with another nation, so that we would be able to give advisory services to that particular nation to reduce the emission. First, the first advisory services would be to calculate carbon footprints, help them to make a low carbon pathway plan for the same to meet their nationally determined contribution, you can say. Then also help them to develop more and more, do technology transfer, or the best knowledge that we do have in India in the form of technology, or the best practices to reduce the emissions. We can give the same to the another nation, for example, maybe Nepal or Bangladesh, or maybe some big nations like UK. We can do the same. And then after under Article 6.2, 6.4, the international program will be that means will get surfaced after, say, 1.5 year, because it had been adopted during last Conference of Parties meeting number 26 at Glasgow, UK, but all the modalities may come in next 6 to 12 months time, because all nations need to get prepared themselves to comply for the same, and the similar manner they need to UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, also need to have some modalities in place related to the operationalization, like getting the project registered, getting the project verified under Article 6.4 of the Paris Agreement. So very big business opportunities are there for the Indian export service providers in reference to operationalizing Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement and Article 6.4 of the Paris Agreement. This is the India's NDC that we had submitted. First one is to increase the fossil fuels to share the share of the non-fossil fuels to 40% of the total electricity generation capacity. Recently, during COP26, our Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, he had declared, or he had given the statement that from 40% we want to get it to 50%. By year 2030. Then the second one is to reduce the emission intensity of economy by 33 to 35% by 2030 from 2005 level. So that is the target that Indian government had submitted to UNFCCC, and to create additional sink of 2.5 to 3 billion tons of CO2. Apart from these three major sectors, if you will do Google the India's NDC, just you need to type India NDC to UNFCCC or to the Paris Agreement, you will be able to get the document. It is around some 50 pages document. You will be able to see how India is planning to achieve its national determined contribution. That document is publicly available either at the MOFCC website. We would be able to see which is the nodal agency in India, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, or otherwise the same data can be referred from Google through UNFCCC website, or various different websites do cover the whole document along with the analysis or synthesis of whatever the targets that we have submitted. Either it's quantitative basis, at various spaces it's qualitative basis, but everything should come into the quantity basis, and that will, so that in coming second version of India's NDC, more clear picture we would be able to get about what are all the sectors in which Indian government is very much focused. Apart from these three targets, Mr. Modi had declared four more stuffs. One is the first one to enhance the first target is the non-fossil fuels electricity generation should be 50%. Then we would be installing 500 gigawatt of renewable energy projects in India by 2030. Then additional 1 billion tons of CO2 we will be reducing apart from this 2.5 to 3 billion. And India is going to achieve net zero emissions by year 2070. And this net zero means whatever the emission that India is doing by 2070, we would be able to absorb all those emissions from the atmosphere, so that we would be getting net zero emissions. So we would be emitting for sure, but we would be absorbing the similar quantity by year 2070. So we do have 50 years time for India, and since having our very good position in the form of knowledge or technology that India is having, we are very sure that we would be able to meet the target before the same. But the next level stuff comes is giving the similar knowledge or experience to the other developing nations, or maybe few sectors in the developed nations also. We would be able to contribute our services. So Indian government is the national nodal agency for coordinating all these stuffs. And during Kyoto Protocol era, one department or one sub-department had been constituted in the form of National CDM Authority of India, under which the projects from sectors like energy efficiency projects, fuel switching projects, industrial process projects, municipal solid waste projects, renewable and forestry projects spread across the country had got the permission to get the registration and sell the credits from India. So there are various programs which are there. First program is Clean Development Mechanism, under which around 1,800 projects are registered from India in VCS, in gold standards. So overall from India, around you can say 2,400 projects got its registration under various mechanisms. Although we need to take permission from NCDMA for the projects which we want to get registered under Clean Development Mechanism, which came from Article 12 of Kyoto Protocol. While the other voluntary programs like Verified Carbon Standard, Gold Standard, Global Carbon Council, we do not need to take any permission from Indian government because those projects are voluntary in nature. Now, during 2020 November, day 27, another committee had been constituted called as AIPA, Apex Committee for Implementation of the Paris Agreement. And AIP has been constituted with the purpose of ensuring a coordinated response on climate change matter that protects the country's interest and ensures that India is on the track towards its climate change obligations under the Paris Agreement. One of the key function, if you Google AIPA MOFCC, would be able to get the complete notification from that came from Government of India. And one of the key function of AIPA had been mentioned was to operate national authority to regulate carbon markets in India under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, formulate guidelines for the consideration of the projects, activities under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, and issue guidelines on the carbon pricing also. For example, if as of now, as of the public information which is available, Bureau of Energy Efficiency under Ministry of Power, Bureau of Energy Efficiency under Ministry of Power is now getting more accountability and responsibility to develop a carbon market in India. And the stakeholder meetings they have started. If you do refer Bureau of Energy Efficiency website, there is a paper that they submitted, the draft document they had just submitted related to the national carbon markets in India. And they are collecting various views from the different stakeholders, from the various ministries, from private players, manufacturing companies, service companies, to develop a carbon market in India. And the COP26 was a benchmark. Now, coming on the main topic, COP26. From here, we will discuss about what was COP26, how COP26 is going to create carbon markets across the world, and how is it going to impact the Indian exporters, either manufacturing or services, service-driven exporters. During 30th October to 13th November, it had been this meeting had been held at Glasgow, United Kingdom, under presidency of United Kingdom, and it must have happened during 2020, but due to this COVID-19, it had been because there was an international restriction for people to join. People are working, the different governments are working under different time zones. It would be very difficult to do such kind of meeting virtually. And so leaving this year 2020, during 2021, this meeting had been conducted. Earlier, it was decided to conduct the same during February 2021, but again, the issues were there. And so it had been done during last month only. So this conference is the first time that parties are expected to commit on enhanced ambition, enhanced ambitious national determined contributions should be submitted after COP21, and parties are required to carry out every 5 years, as outlined in the Paris Agreement, a process known as ratchet mechanism. These were the major issues. So in next slide of mine, we will discuss the outcomes of COP26. So the issues were, what is the definition of mitigation outcomes? What is the definition of internationally traded mitigation outcomes? How the corresponding adjustments or double counting issue will get in place? how the registered projects will do it, migrated from Kyoto Protocol to Paris Agreement era, how the issued or unissued credits from the Kyoto Protocol era, the projects which are registered as the CDM will get treated. What is the threshold date of registration, date of trading period, date of issuance, the requirement of letter of approval, migration of methodology, procedures, forms, formats, and many other issues were there that was the prime agenda during COP26. So this is one slide summary. If we will do refer. So here is the global target that we are targeting under the Paris Agreement, which is limiting global temperature below 1.5 degrees centigrade, and it should not increase to 2 degrees centigrade. For doing that, we need to reduce 52 to 58 gigatons of emission reduction from the atmosphere every year. And the international carbon market mechanism will get its place very soon under this Paris Agreement, under Article 6.2 or under Article 6.4. So that is the end goal that we are looking for. Now, how Indian government is acting or reacting or doing its work to meet the Paris Agreement era. So we have already submitted here, if you see the submission of nationally determined contributions, we have already done. Now, what Indian government is going to do is to put regulations related to caps and penalties. We will do work on we are already working on the policies like solar power project or that means renewable energy projects or forestation or various other activities Indian government is planning to have through non-market approaches, either to adopt emission trading schemes. So already we are working over the same, and in some or other form we do have carbon taxes already available in our economy. Then creation of domestic carbon market will happen very soon, maybe within a year or two. A voluntary carbon market may be there in place in India and in other developing nations. So Indian service exporters is having very good opportunity here to work within India, obviously, but our major focus is the export. So all nations, around 200, for example, would be having their own carbon market in some or other form, in the form of tax, in the form of ETS, in the form of selling the credits, in the form of buying the credits. So Indian service exporters, especially focusing the environmental sector, would be having immense opportunity to grow during the Paris Agreement era. Then after it moves under cooperative approaches. So every year, India has to submit its monitoring, reporting, and verification report, national MRV or communication. Every 2 years as of now, we are doing it, and maybe as per the new regulation, we need to submit the same every five years, I think. So national MRV we need to submit every 5 years. After that, this is the targeted this is a work that Indian government would be playing during next 5 to 10 years initially, and then later on it may be having more or high ambitious or strict or rigid targets for the emission reduction from India, contribution from India. Then what the organizations need to do within India. So allocation, Indian government may do allocate, create compliance market, may do allocate emission reduction targets to the companies which are there in India, which are registered in India, which are operating in India. So what the organizations need to do, they need to start GHG accounting, greenhouse gas accounting, similar to the financial accounting that the organizations used to do through the different standards, either ISO 14064 or either through WRI standard GHG protocol. Then implementation, they will start implementing the mitigation measures or the projects to reduce the emissions, and maybe use the voluntary market for the economic mitigation. That means if they will not be able to reduce the emission, then they may be allowed to buy the carbon offsets which are generated through the voluntary carbon market or compliance carbon market within India. And so in few years to come, organizations also need to submit their GHG data in the form of monitoring, reporting, and verification. So all this data across from different sectors, from different companies from India, within India, will to get accumulated. Then it will get added to the national MRV, and then it will be submitted to global to the Paris Agreement, to the UNFCCC for measuring either whatever the emissions that we are doing cumulatively across the globe. Either is it helping to reduce or capping the 1.5 degree centigrade temperature or not? Or if it's not, then United Nations will do create more pressure for the nations to reduce its emission through the submission of more ambitious NDCs. So corporate focus, ultimately the corporate focus will be, and this is not only for India, this particular say slide is applicable across the world. This is not only specific to India. So Indian exporters, service exporters may take their own position on which market they are looking to focus. So GHG inventory, GHG projects, carbon neutrality. So yes, under Article 6.2, 6.4, we will be getting the trading opportunity, the generation of carbon credits, or generation of internationally traded mitigation outcomes, or Article 6.4 emission reductions. These are the two environmental commodity which will get surfaced in a year, in almost less than 2 years. It will get surfaced and it will get traded in the international carbon markets. Voluntary carbon markets is already there. So as of now, the size of voluntary market is ranging in between $1 to $2 billion. India is having very good position in reference to selling of carbon credits in the voluntary markets. Major credits are coming from India, then from China, and then Turkey, as of our experience. And non-market approaches are also there. Apart from all these stuff, these two sectors, aviation and maritime, these are the two sectors which were not, which had not been considered majorly to any reduction targets during last 15, 20 years. And so to limit the aviation from the civil aviation, only civil aviation, not military operations or the other activities related to aviation is going in the globe, but only civil aviation. The emission from that is coming from that particular sector had been limited through the adaptation of a CORSIA mechanism, under which all airlines, international airlines, need to reduce its emission, including India. So in India, we will be having the target to buy carbon offsets to limit the this particular aviation emissions by year, starting from year 2027. And maritime is the only industry which do not have any target to reduce the emissions as of now, but because of this high international pressure from various other sectors also, because maritime is the most efficient, cheapest mode of transportation on Earth, and that whatever the emission that this particular mode of transportation is doing, it's not being capped as of now. So in coming few years, maybe a year or 2 or 3, we would be able to see how maritime industry is going to contribute to meet the Paris Agreement era, its contribution towards reduction of the global temperature rise. So these are the two last slides of this presentation, and then I will do cover the outcomes of COP26 through our second PPT that I've prepared. So here, the business and employment opportunities at carbon market, supply chain stakeholders, and for the stakeholders, it's there. So first one is equipment manufacturing or EPC contractor, technology-wise, like the solar cell manufacturers are there, wind turbine manufacturers are there. So these are the manufacturing sectors that can export, they can produce, they can export for the carbon markets to limit the temperature rise. This particular stakeholder number one would play a very important role to supply the technology. Then the seller of carbon credits are there, which comes under one of the key stakeholders. In India, it's like ACME or Renew Power. Then project developers, we are also one of EK is also a seller of the credits, or the project proponent, project owner of few of our projects. We do have our own projects on ground in India and abroad. Then project developers are there, or advisory organizations are there, which helps projects to get registration, verification, issuance, and trading of credits. So we are also positioned under the same third-party inspection companies. Uh, so in India, there are 4 or 5 third-party inspection companies are there. Like globally, it's around 40, 50, but from India, the companies like KBS is there, 4K service provider is there. Then after Epic Sustainability is there, Earthwood Services is there. So these are 4 companies which are approved from United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change under Kyoto Protocol as of now to validate, verify the carbon credits which are generated across the globe. So Indian auditors, they do have very good position, very important position in on globe to do such kind of third-party inspection, giving third-party inspection services. Then if someone is looking for to work with a designated national authority, this is the 5th number stakeholder, to work with a standard or regulatory body like CDM, which is gold standard direct figure. So someone can develop its own regulatory body also to standard. In India, there is one upcoming standard is there called as CRI, Carbon Registry of India. Another one is I do not remember the name. It's Unified or something. Some name is here. I do not remember exactly, but yes, 2 programs are upcoming from India, from developing nations. Minority of the programs had been got surfaced and adopted across the world, but from the programs or standards which are generated from Europe or US, they are very famous, like VCS, like gold standard, like IRAC, Tiger. So then traders are also there. Service exporters can become also the traders if they do have good financial background with them to buy and sell the credits. And seller and aggregators are there, buyer and aggregators are there. Thereafter, buyer of credits are there, NGOs are there, registry operators, exchanges. So we can develop Indian software service providers, service exports that they are doing. For example, they can develop exchanges to trade the carbon credits, or they can create marketplaces to get enabling of selling or trading of the carbon credits. Investors are there in abundance in our industry. So news media, magazine portals are also there. So Indian service providers, exporters can develop more and more expertise to become a news media house, and then ultimately we can work with the multilateral organizations like World Bank, GIZ, ADB. So these are the key stakeholders in our industry with which we are working. Just a minute. I'm trying to share another screen of mine. Just a minute. So during last slide, I had covered the background of what are the greenhouse gases, what is the greenhouse gas effect, what is global warming, what is climate change, how the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change had been constituted, what is Kyoto Protocol, what is Paris Agreement, how Indian government is playing its position through Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, through maybe National CDM Authority of India, or through AIPA Apex Committee for the implementation of Paris Agreement. What is India's nationally determined contribution is there, and how the key stakeholders in our industry would be able to increase their exports internationally. Now coming over, I will take next 10-15 minutes to cover the key outcomes from the COP26 and carbon markets. So this is the credential of ours. Enking International is having 2,500 plus clients, 150 plus people located in 18 plus nations. We have executed more than 1,000 plus projects, and we are the only listed company in the world. We are listed here at in our domain. We are listed at BAC, and it makes us as the world's largest carbon credit project developer and supplier. So United Nations framework, again, just to already we have covered these two slides. So yes, this Kyoto Protocol had started from 1997, and actually it came in the global carbon markets. It took shape and size during 2005, but this UNFCCC had started during 92-93. So this global warming, climate change issue had been identified during that particular time, 92-93. So we are almost 30 years. So this industry, the recognition of this climate change problem or global warming problem, it had crossed almost 30 years as of now. So first, UNFCCC came into the picture after the Kyoto Protocol, after the Paris Agreement, and in this Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement had constituted or created a compliance market. Now, the voluntary market is also there for the non-state actors like the private sector. And so, for example, if there is a company, say textile company located in Germany, and if that particular textile company is emitting 1 million tons of CO2 every year, and under emission trading scheme, European Union emission trading scheme, if that particular company would get target to reduce its emission, say by 10%, but remaining 90% out of that 1 million tons of CO2 that that particular company is emitting on year basis. So that 90 ton, they are allowed to buy carbon credits from the voluntary sector. Not allowed because it's a voluntary action that they will be doing. So they buy carbon credits from the voluntary market through the programs like VCS Gold Standard, GCC, or maybe CDM POA. And then they would be able to achieve carbon neutrality or net zero emissions that they are looking for their any particular product or any service or whole organization or event, or like in India, Zomato is buying carbon offsets under private initiative, under CSR activities that they are doing. ITC Hotel, they are doing it. Delhi Airport, Bombay Airport, Hyderabad Airport, Bangalore Airport, they are doing it. So they are all the private non-state actors. State means the nation or the government. So non-state actors like the private sector, they are doing its own activity to reduce the emission. The agenda was the goals of COP26 was to secure global net zero by mid-century and keep 1.5 degrees centigrade within reach, adapt to protect communities and natural habitats, mobilize finance, carbon finance, or in the form of other finances, work together to deliver, to achieve this Paris Agreement target, and finalize rules to operationalize. Article 6 was the major goals during COP26 at the start of the COP26. And these are the key outcomes at the end of the COP26. Like we have got Glasgow Climate Pact. Enhanced transparency framework had been adopted. Common time frame for NDCs had been given. Adaptation fund, Warsaw mechanism for loss and damage, and Article 6.2 and 6.4 had been adopted during COP26. So what is Glasgow Pact? What had been discussed during Glasgow Pact is the mitigation. Countries, all the nations had been urged to strengthen climate actions and NDCs, reduce coal usage, reduce subsidies, inefficient subsidies that all nations may be giving over the non-utilization of non-fossil fuels, making synthesis report, hold annual meetings. So this were the key outcomes that were being surfaced through Glasgow Climate Pact. Adaptation, loss and damage, richer and developed nations shall fund disaster management in the smaller nations. So that was one of the key outcome there. Enhanced transparency framework. According to the agreed framework, parties, that means nations, may submit their national communication related to the reduction of the emissions, that is through national inventory report, through biennial transparency report, as a single report in the form of common tabular format, so that analysis can be done very easily in accordance with the modalities, procedures, and guidelines adopted during COP26. Common time frame to update national determined contribution document. So every 5 years it should be done. adaptation fund had been discussed. So COP26 acknowledged that financial contributions had failed to meet the 2020 goal of $100 billion on year-to-year basis. All developed nations need to accumulate that fund and need to deploy that particular fund in developing nations. So I had discussed ways to scale up the collective contribution for the next period to 2030, and share of proceeds adaptation fund is to assist developing countries or parties that are particularly vulnerable to the adverse effect of climate change to meet the cost of adaptation. Warsaw mechanism had been discussed. Yes, so these are the key outcomes under Article 6.2 and 6.4. So Article 6.2, the agreement can be signed between any two nations, say India and Bhutan, for example. Defined ITMOs in terms of CO2 equivalent includes reduction and removals. So any project which helps to reduce the emissions, or any project which helps to remove the emissions. The example of such kind of projects are the reduction projects used to be installation of solar power project, wind power project. These are the mitigation projects, and removal projects are to adopt carbon sequestration technology or nature-based solutions in the form of forest, agricultural, sustainable agricultural practices, and mangroves. Corresponding adjustments on all first transfers. So all the credits which are being transferred under Article 6.2 or 6.4 need corresponding adjustment. That means there should be no double counting. Two nations should not count the single ITMO at two different registries. So that should not be done. And reporting, recording, tracking, no mandatory share of profit, no mandatory haircuts of OMG was being that had been adopted during 6.2 negotiations, and so during 6.4, the new carbon credit terminology had been surfaced that time as related to the ART 6.4 ER. That was the credits which are coming from Article 6.4 may be called as Article 6.4 emission reductions. Can be authorized by host party. Towards now, the Indian government is working on which kind of projects they would do allowed to sell their carbon credits out of India. How the projects, which kind of projects will get its migration from Kyoto Protocol to Paris Agreement. So the project should be registered from year 2013 to 2020. They are allowed to get their carbon credits sold to any nation to meet its NDC under Article 6.4 that had been decided. And all the projects from 2005 to 2020, they may be allowed to get migrated depending over the approval from Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. So Indian government should be working over the same to get all these regulations in place. The crediting period would be 5 years, twice renewable. That means 15 years, 10 years fixed. Earlier it was 10 years fixed, 7 years renewable, twice renewable. That means 21 years. So there is a cut of 7 years crediting period under Article 6.4. And for removal projects, it would be renewable twice, 15 years. So that means renewal twice, that means 45 years for the removal based projects. For 45 years, you would be able to get the project registration, and every year we would be able to get the verification of credits. And for next 45 years, we would be able to get the issuance of carbon credits. Share of proceeds and cancellation of OMG accumulates to be 7%. Earlier it was 2% plus 10 cent, 20 cent formula was there. So now more expenses would need to be faced by the project owners by deduction of 7% of the carbon credits that they may be having from their project. So the registered projects migration already we have discussed, and more COP during COP27, which will do happen at Egypt next year during November, and COP28 would happen at UAE during 2023. So more transparency will do come during next 2 years for getting some the clear picture about the international carbon market, and the whole opportunities will get surfaced by next 2 years. The voluntary carbon market will do not face any issue in reference to the registration or issuance, but the only important thing that we want is the buyer market or buying market need to understand that voluntary carbon offsetting and funds to finance in achieving NDCs of host country are the same carbon, are the same stuffs. And since they do not have any reporting obligation, the voluntary buyers, they do not have any reporting obligation pre and post COP26. So we do not see any problem in existence of the voluntary carbon market in coming few years. Coming few years, or you can say to few decades, you can say. So this is the and the final recommendations of ours for the projects registered internationally. So it is recommended to get your project included under any POA, for example, so that the projects will to get easy migration process under Article 6.4 instead of having wait and watch position. That means whatever the new criteria will to come, and if your project would not be allowed to get you registered, then you may face the problem. Completion of monitoring and reporting activities should be done, and we must be able to sell the credits in the voluntary carbon markets. Get projects registered under any eligible mechanism as soon as possible, and whenever the transition rules regulations will do come, we should apply for the migration for the registered CDM projects and POAs to the new under Article 6.4 of the Paris Agreement. So we had conducted various webinars there at COP26 at Turkey Pavilion, at ITA booth, and the stuffs. And yes, thank you very much. This is the last slide of mine. So I request now SEPC Secretariat to take it over.
Thank you so much, Manish ji, for such a comprehensive and extensive presentation. In fact, you see, like I have heard a lot about carbon credits, and many of the participants, those who are new to this. So excuse me if I ask a very simple question, and I think that can give some understanding to me also. Like, the goals and whatever has been set, we have to actually carry out our activities as whatever role we have. But just for for a new entrepreneur in this area, I just want to understand that as mentioned, if there is 1 ton of carbon dioxide or any 7 of the greenhouse gases you mentioned, if they reduce that emission by 1 ton, they are given a certificate by UNFCCC, which we normally call carbon credit. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Now, say for example, as a manufacturer, I'm able to reduce my emission by 1 ton in a given year. Okay, and that yes, I get a certificate from UNFCCC. Now, whom do I sell it? That carbon credit which I get, the certificate which I get, whom do I sell it, and how it is actually, the entire mechanism over there. That is, I feel, if you can highlight, that will create a lot of doubt and some ideas it can.
Surely. I will be sharing a process document here. Just a minute. So, yeah, before coming to the actual process cycle, these are the 5 different, not only United Nations or under the CDM, we can get the project registered under different mechanisms, like here we have mentioned CDM, POA, VCS, Gold Standard, GCC, depending on the eligibility criteria. First, manufacturing company should be able to check what are all the projects that they had implemented and what is eligibility criteria to get the project registered. So So here is the eligibility criteria under CDM. What is the application criteria? What is the registration fee under VCS? What is the criteria under GS, under GCC? So all these criteria are there. These are the type of projects in renewable. It's solar, wind, hydro, biomass, biogas, geothermal, solar water, in energy efficiency. If any manufacturing setup or service-based organization, if they are doing or implementing lighting-based projects, process optimization, waste recovery, boiler, furnace, exothermic, nature-based solution, if they are doing any forestry projects, planting forest, doing sustainable agricultural practices in the form of organic farming or sustainable rice farming, or if they are adopting blue carbon projects like putting mangroves over the seashore, or doing any waste management project activities, then all those projects are eligible. This is the process cycle. So for example, if someone had installed 5 megawatt solar power project, they are at the rooftop, say, the project identification is a solar power project, implementation they will do, project comes under operational state, and generation of carbon credits. They need to select a consultant like us. We will prepare all the documents. We'll hire a third-party inspection company called as DOE, designated operational entity. They do site inspection. They do issue us the validation report. Then we need to take permission from designated national authority, MOFCC, if we want to get it registered under CDM mechanism, which is a compliance mechanism as of now for the Indian projects. Then we get the registration. So this is the first step to get the project registered. It takes 4 to 8 months time to get the registration process completed. Ideally, it should be done whenever we do identify the project. After, if due to some or other problem, if the project owner or the industry, if they are not able to apply after commissioning, they can also apply based on the eligibility criteria. But ideally, it should be done at the time of project identification only within the company. Then every year we do prepare a monitoring report. We do hire a third-party inspection company here. They do site inspection, they do issue verification certification report, and then issuance of carbon credit will come. Then the question that you asked is we need to find a buyer. Buyers usually the trading used to happen on over-the-counter basis, OTC. There is no exchange available as of now for the voluntary credits. For the compliance credit, the new exchange may come in 2-3 years time period. They need to sign a contract with them, transfer carbon credits. So carbon credits used to be there in the DMAT format, for example, and we need to have a registry account for the project owner, and the buyer should also have its own registry account. Transfer of credits will done based on the contract called as emission reduction purchase agreement, and the money will get then transacted to the project owner bank account. So this is the normal process for any kind of carbon credit project. If someone wants to get it registered, verified, and then sell the credits.
What does the buyer do with the carbon credit which he buys?
So buyers, just a minute. Yes. So if you see my screen, yes. So there are two types of carbon offsetting mechanisms, or two types of buyers used to be there. One is the compliance buyer, another one is the voluntary sort of buyer. Like I had given the example of Zomato or Indian airports or ITC hotel, or various companies like IT company like Mahindra. They do buy carbon offsets voluntarily. So these are the sectors. Oil and gas company like Shell BP, they do buy it. Aviation industries, they are like Delta Airlines, Lufthansa Airlines, Emirates. Marine industry, sports events like FIFA or World Cup, they do buy the carbon offsets. Events, logistics and supply chain, FMCG companies, fashion and apparel, automobile company like BMW, Mercedes, they do buy the same. Financial institutions like ADB, World Bank, or IMF, they do buy this kind of credits, hospitality. So these are the wide range of voluntary carbon offsetting buyers are there. So they are doing it for the only for the voluntary purpose, for voluntary obligations, the voluntary or not obligations, but voluntary, the pledges that they have signed to become net zero or carbon neutral by some particular year. And otherwise, there are another compliance stream is there where the carbon offsets are required to be bought by the buyers or the obligated entities under CORSIA. So all civil aviation airline operators, they need to buy the same under Korea emission trading scheme, where various buyers are there. Under upstream emission trading scheme is there, under carbon tax mechanism there at Singapore and South Africa is there. And Article 6 of the Paris Agreement will do surface more and more such kind of compliance mechanisms across the world. So these are the two demand generators which are there recently in the voluntary carbon offsetting. Cryptocurrencies are also buying the carbon offsets to either make themselves carbon neutral or cancel the credits and get the new issuance of the cryptocurrency. That is the new sector that had been surfaced during last 3-4 months. So there are various sources of the demand which is coming in the international carbon market, either from the form of voluntary, either in the form of the compliance.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
In fact,
actually, we have many questions.
Yeah.
We see many hands raised. So, so would request you to answer. So, Mr. Vikas Mishra, you can ask your question. Please.
Mr. Vikas, to kindly come online and ask a question. You have raised your hand. Okay, next is
Let's go to this.
Yeah.
Mr. Vikas is not online. Let's go to Mr. Sanjay Jeti. Mr. Sanjay, kindly ask your question, please.
Yeah, like good morning, everyone. It's a nice presentation. This is my question is like in carbon market, what about other non-carbon GHGs like nitrous oxide, sulfur, hexafluoride, nitrogen trifluoride? There is no carbon here. So how this is quantified?
So they are not categorized as the greenhouse gases, and there is no any national or maybe I do not have clear information.
Part of greenhouse gases as shown in the presentation. From your green presentation only I took these 3 compounds.
Sir, it's nitrous oxide. So majorly that particular gas comes from the fertilizer, utilization of the fertilizer in the farms, and not its NO2 or SO2. No, SOx, NOx, those gases are not being considered as the greenhouse gases as per United Nations notification, and there is no any international regulation to cap those gases. There may be national one. I do not have much information about the same, but because in some other form, Indian government is also working to limit that SOx, NOx emission from the industries or from other sources. But they are, as of now, they are not considered as the significant greenhouse gas.
Okay, but actually in the presentation, I took it from your presentation. That's why in your first slides, it is shown under GHG, these compounds.
Only one, sir, SOx is not there.
No, it's there, sir.
Yeah,
I took it
so
from SF6 and
SF6 is there, sir. Sulfur, hexafluoride is there.
And NF3, yeah. Anyway.
NF3 we have.
That is up to for the decision. Second is this: how forestation, like carbon sinks, are quantified as carbon credits. Like when you do forestation, carbon sinks are formed, which absorb the carbon.
Yes.
And that also reduces the global warming.
Yes.
And
yes,
in turn, I mean, affects the climate change towards a favorable state. So how that is quantified actually in carbon credits? Forestation.
So the biomass, the carbon that we are sequestering in the with the help of nature-based solution like the forestry, the plants or the trees, not plants but the trees, because we do quantify the same based on the biomass that had been consumed by those particular trees. So there are 2-3 different species, you can say. One is a fast growing one is a mid level, and one is a low level. So the fast growing one are like the bamboo. So we need to check how much carbon content had been sequestered, CO2 had been sequestered in the form of biomass that had been consumed by those particular trees. Or although bamboo is a grass, comes under the grass category, but yes, whatever the biomass that had been consumed by those particular species of the plants or the trees, we do calculate it based on the calculation that had been approved by United Nations. So with the help of satellites also we get the data about how much biomass that had been sequestered in a particular area, that we can do it with the help of satellites.
Okay. So which means that the forestation carbon credits are also traded in the carbon market.
Yes, they used to be called as NBS credits, nature-based solution credits, NBS.
Okay. Sir, one more question, sir. What is a ratchet mechanism you mentioned in your first presentation? Ratchet mechanism, some
that I need to
5 years, every 5 years some monitoring is there, MBR or something like that is there.
So every 5 years under the Paris Agreement, every 5 years all nations at the same timeline, they need to update their NDC, National Determined Contribution document, every 5 years. So that is the obligation which came after COP26.
Okay. And CDM stands for?
Clean Development Mechanism.
Okay. Okay. Sir, the last 4 slides in the first presentation, can it be mailed to me, sir? Because these are business opportunities.
Surely.
I have given my email ID jsanjay11@gmail.com.
I do believe this particular webinar should be there publicly available after some time.
If the whole presentation can be given,
it
would be very nice. If the whole first presentation, the whole thing could be given.
Surely.
Because it's all comprehensively put in one presentation, everything we need to know.
Yes.
These are all related with business opportunities only.
Yes.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
You can go to Manish Kothari. Next question.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Nilesh Kothari, you are allowed to speak. Kindly ask your question. Mr. Nilesh, are you there?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
So my question is related to the validity of the carbon credits. We are a power generating company, and suppose due to the government obligations and the whatever the Paris agreements are there, if we want to buy the carbon credits, suppose in the next 2-3 years, then what will be the validity of the carbon credits?
As of now, there is no any problem related to the validity of the carbon credits. Any company can buy any sort of carbon credit which is being issued during any particular year. Only in the CDM mechanism, there is a problem. The credits which were issued before or which may be issued before 31st December, having vintage of before 31st December 2012, those are not transferable. So those credits used to be there in the UNFCCC registry only. Otherwise, other mechanism, either CDM or VCS Gold Standard GCC, all the credits are transferable without having any expiry limits.
Okay, means you told that it is a tradable one. So means I can purchase the credits and I can even sell it within the
Surely,
country.
it is kind of an within country, out of country also. So it is a kind of an environmental commodity, international environmental commodity, not any domestic or national one.
Means it can be purchased at X price and can be sold at Y. Maybe Y lesser or higher.
Yes, every commodity used to face a similar feature.
Okay. Okay, fine. Means my only question was related to validity. Means over a period of time, suppose my pollution control is right now in a controlled manner, and suppose after some time, maybe by the addition of the capacity, means if it is going to be more, so will that credits which I have purchased is at a lesser price today will be helpful me for after 2-3 years or like that? That was the question related to validity.
Surely, surely. As of now, there is no any problem. But if you want to consider the same under any compliance mechanism, to get accommodated under any compliance mechanism, then I do see like it's a high risk, because there is no any compliance guidelines had been issued by the government of India or by any state government. And maybe it may happen if you will do buy it, and if those credits are not being allowed to be adjusted within your emission inventory by that particular new regulation, it may be a risk. So you need to take your own decision.
Okay, thank you.
I think Mr. Samuel Koshi has a lot of questions on the chat, so he can just unmute and ask them.
Samuel Koshi is not raised the hand.
It's not raised yet.
No, he
You
has
can
many
repeat it.
questions.
You can repeat
Just
the
read
question.
it.
You can
Okay.
speak out.
I think we missed a couple of them. So I think the first one, can we just scroll up, because I think his question is
The chat.
Here.
Just go up.
here. Yeah, so he's saying that how is carbon weight determined? Is there any machine or mechanism to understand carbon by ton?
From where can I refer that particular question?
It is there in the chat.
In chat or in Q&A?
There in the chat.
It's there in the chat.
Mr. Koshi Samuel is asking this.
At 11:30.
At 11:30, okay. Just a minute, sir.
Asking one thing.
11:30. I do not know.
May I read the question?
I'm not able to.
Okay, I think we can read it.
May I read the question for you?
Yes, please.
How is carbon weight determined? Is there any machine or mechanism to understand carbon by ton?
What is the first line? What is determined? Carbon?
Weight is determined.
Weight.
You see, when we say 1 ton carbon emission,
How do you
so he
weigh?
basically wants
Okay.
to understand that what is the mechanism to
Okay.
measure.
Okay, so United Nations had approved various methodologies through which we would be able to determine how to calculate the baseline emissions, how to calculate project emissions, how to calculate leakage emissions. So the actual emission reduction would be the baseline emission minus project emission minus leakage emission, and all the methodologies had been given by United Nations through various methodologies, like if the project is solar power project is there, or the grid connected energy project is there, and heavy capacity less than 15 megawatts. So there is a methodology called as AMS1D. That is a methodology we do refer. If the capacity is more than 15 megawatt, then we do refer ACM 0002. That is a methodology that we do refer. And similarly, more than say 400, 500 methodologies are there, which had been approved by United Nations to evaluate actual reduction from any particular technology. Or if it's not there for any specific technology, then we need to suggest a new methodology to get approved from United Nations, and which may take 6 months to say 2 years time.
He has asked another related question, that the IMF has recommended a global average carbon price of $75 USD per ton by the end of the decade. But that figure should be, he said, at least $100, and right away to reach net zero emissions by 2050. According to the media view of about 30 climate economists from around the world, polled from September 16 to October 20, ahead of this year's meet. So he's actually talking about the pricing part. So maybe if you
so pricing is the matter rather that need to be discussed between buyer and seller of credits or the policymakers at the national or international level. We would not be comment over the same because it's a market, it's a dynamic based on the national, international market dynamics or global politics. So coming a few years, we may be able to see the same. Although if you refer European Union emission trading scheme, already in that particular mechanism, a few days back we saw the carbon credit rate is more than $100. So already some regional emission trading schemes are showing the similar number, but at the global level, we need to wait to see such kind of benchmarks.
In fact, there are two questions. They are catering to different industry. One question I saw, I'm just right now seeing in the chat box is how this carbon credit is applicable to fertilizers industry. That is one. Second, somebody asked about travel and tourism industry. So,
so fertilizer, if we are using fertilizer in the farms, then it is instead of it, if we are using sustainable rice farming practices, for example, or organic farming practices, then we would be able to avoid the utilization of fertilizer or getting emission back of that nitrous oxide into the atmosphere. So this particular N2O gas is associated with that particular activity, and so use of if we'll do avoid use of fertilizers, or in the travel and tourism industry, if I do not, because travel and tourism industry is majorly based service driven, I think, having the infrastructure backup in the form of hotels or resorts. So if you are adopting green building, if you are putting green building in place, then all those companies would be able to earn carbon credits for the same. Or if to make the travel and tourism industry carbon neutral, any specific particular hotel or any particular trip carbon neutral, someone can offer carbon credits to their customers to set off the emissions that they may be doing because of availing their services, or that may be integrated into the services. Like in Europe and US, we have observed there are few service event or travel and tourism service providers. They do offer carbon neutral birthday trips, carbon neutral marriage anniversary celebration, carbon neutral honeymoon. So various innovative stuffs are there in that particular market in the travel and tourism industry.
I think let's take some hand surveys.
Mr. Agarwal is there. Mr. Agarwal, if you are online, kindly ask your question, please.
Yeah, thank you. Manish, I wanted to ask one thing. When do you think the host country approval will become applicable? And once it becomes applicable, do you think it will affect the already registered projects under various mechanisms like BCS, gold standard, etc.?
As of now, we do not anticipate any problem for the voluntary credits trading for the projects which are registered in India. So that is the anticipation that we do have, although the position we need to check from Indian government or the other nations, because that particular selling of carbon credits is not contributing to the double counting, because whatsoever the credits that are going out of India, they are not being contributed or adjusted or accounted in the national registry of the developed nation or the buying nation country. So we do not foresee any problem for the same. And what was another question of yours?
When do you think it will become applicable, the host country approval?
So any project which wants to get its registration after 1 January 21 under CDM mechanism or under Article 6.2 or 6.4 mechanism, they have to take host country approval from Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change starting from 1 January 21. So already
that will not be applicable for voluntary markets.
As of now, no.
Okay, thank you.
There is another question from Mr. Suresh Kumar. Can you come online and please ask your question? Mr. Suresh, are you there? It seems he's not there.
Hello.
Yeah, Mr.
Suresh. Yeah, Suresh. Good morning, all of you.
Morning, sir.
I have one need a clarification from Mr. Manish. Mr. Manish, for example, we have taken a target for 2030 to become carbon neutral. Okay. Whereas we are working on the like taking up the nature-based solutions like improve.
Yeah,
We're not able to hear you. Hello?
It seems there is a technical problem at Mr. Suresh hand.
Yes.
Can we ask another question which is typed by Mr. Koshi? Mr. Koshi Simon has another question. Why can't CO2 be sucked out of air directly and converted to carbon block or stored under the earth in reservoirs? Why this technology is not implemented in every high CO2 countries? He's asking like why CO2 is not directly sucked out of air.
So I would not be able to comment why those nations had not opted for the same, because our main topic here is related to the carbon markets in COP26 and not related to the adaptation of any particular technology by any particular nation or any company or any sector. So I would not be able to comment for the same.
Exactly. Like we can't, we are actually not dealing with the technology. It is about the and of course an awareness on the COP26 and what are the goals and where do we fit in. Now we are actually falling short of time. So what I'll do is like we'll just run through the very presentation is actually very large one, but we'll just gloss over a few slides. And since our members and in fact other participants are there from this particular sector, and they may like to know the role of SEPC and in what way we can support. So I'll just run through the few slides. If you can just share, and then we'll close it. Yeah. Just click that. That one. Yeah. Yeah, please go ahead on the next slide. Straight away on the next one. I won't spend much time on it. In case of services, there are 4 modes of exports. So let's talk about the services, what SEPC offers. Mainly 4 services, trade information, then export, that is trade intelligence, export development, export promotion, and enabling business environment. So whatever Manish ji today in the morning has said in the entire presentation, you know, a few things are very common. One, he informed a lot about their stakeholders in this particular sector when we more especially talked about the carbon credit market, and that is also one of the area in the environmental sector.
Screen, we cannot see the screen.
I will stop it.
Please. I think people can't see the screen. Just a moment. I believe everyone can see the screen.
Yes.
Okay. आपको screen कीजिए. अरे वहाँ. Slideshow.
Third slide.
Slideshow.
I'm there, sir.
Slideshow.
Yeah, this is the third one. It is. I'm on the third slide now. And slideshow is here.
Enabling business environment. So here we are talking, he mentioned about regulations and other aspects. So SEPC can provide such information. Of course, we so far in since when SEPC was established, since then we have not focused much on this particular given sector. But now with the leadership of Mr. Manish Dabkara, we are definitely moving ahead, and a lot of ideas and programs will be rolled out. And today's webinar is actually one step forward in that direction. Next slide, please. Next slide. What has happened? Yeah, just skip this. Just go to the
Previous one.
please skip. Now I'm coming straight away to the benefits what the Ministry of Commerce is providing. In the questionnaire, I saw some of you were mentioning about ACIS and other things. You see, there are many other benefits beyond ACIS. ACIS is on the exports done on whatever carbon credit you are going to sell on that. ACIS can be, in fact, it is yet not a part of ACIS, but we are working with government in order to incentivize this part also. But besides that, there are certain benefits which are directly and indirectly given to the exporting community. Can I go to the next slide? You make it on the slide so then it is easier for you. Yeah. I don't know why it is not happening. Let's scroll down. Scroll down. Scroll down. One is like these are the services, these are the schemes where one can get benefit directly or indirectly when we do capacity building programs. So today, the insight which has been provided, in fact, we've rolled out some capacity development program and create awareness. So that can be funded partly by the Ministry of Commerce. And it has like the component which Ministry of Commerce covers is venue cost, faculty charges, organizing expenses, and a budget is given. Of course, on the extreme right, you can see rupees 1 crore up to that. They may not give this much, but certain amount they will give. So we can subsidize the cost of capacity building to our exporting community. Next slide, please. Marketing, branding. Now this is where like we'll have to play, SEPC plays a greater role. And we'll come out with some plans to, when we, like India, how it brands itself in the carbon credit market or anything relating to the environmental sector. We can focus on this under this particular scheme. Next slide, please. Now here it is promotion of, no, we can skip this specifically to the certain. Now, promotion of the e-business tools. As I can understand, a lot of this carbon credit market can also be done on a digital platform. We are working on it, and government is actually pushing e-commerce market in every area. So maybe certain funds we can avail. We can create a web portal. I was just, while going through the presentation of Manish, I was just thinking that why not SEPC come up with something, and on carbon credit market itself. May not be exchange kind of thing, but at least a portal where we do have the information of buyers and sellers as well as a reservoir. And, all certified, all with due credibility. If we can put it on the portal, government is definitely going to fund it. And for our exporting community members, we may not charge as well. So that's how the support will be given to them. And it will create a kind of global branding opportunity for them. We can carry out some market study as well for a given market based on the support by the government. Next. Now, organizing exhibitions. This is very much in the pipeline. So there, if we can, we will be inviting overseas business visitor to India. That is one. We can also participate in international events. So a lot of cost is subsidized for the exporters. Your install cost, the travel cost is also reimbursed partly. So that is also there as a part of the support system by the Ministry of Commerce. The next slide, please. I'm just rushing through because it's all we can share with everyone. Now this already I've covered. Our BSM as we call it when we invite. Now this is something important, and there I need more information. You know, services sector so far has not used this funding support from the ministry. Now, if there is any mandatory registration in any given country required by the people operating in this particular sector, they can get their costs reimbursed up to rupees 2 crore. So, Manish, please do suggest and all the participants, and we can develop a mechanism. In one of your slides, I saw that there are certain registration costs. So this is a huge support. In fact, pharma industry has benefited a lot from this support. So we need to extend it to the services sector. So next slide, please. Besides that, we can, this is actually not relevant to this particular sector. And MSME is relevant. Just go on to the last one. I think MSME ministry is also coming up with some scheme on the services. So we are trying to build in there itself. No, that is what I needed to present. I think more or less I have covered. Yeah, I have covered almost everything. I have already covered.
So I think, yeah.
Please stop sharing.
Over. The presentation is over.
Thank you.
No, I just rushed through the presentation. Most of the things are quite common, and I'll be repeating again and again whenever I get an opportunity to interact. Since we are already, we have crossed, I believe it was scheduled up to 11:30 and participants. So some of them are also dropping on. So I'd have Shami to have the last word. Before that, Manish, if you can just sum it up.
Yes, so Indian during last 15 years, you see the audit industry in the climate change space or in the carbon credit industry, audit industry and consultancy industry had played a very important role. That means we do have very good resources available within India, and internationally, all these resources had been mobilized during 15 years, last 15 years during Kyoto Protocol period. Now in the Paris Agreement period, we may be requiring more and more professionals or expert organizations from India into the environmental domain, and to serve the companies or help companies, manufacturing service-based organizations across the world to improve their ESG rating, to get the climate finance, carbon finance, to buy the credits, sell the credits, to achieve their carbon neutral goal, climate neutral journey, to achieve their carbon neutral journey and net zero emission journey. And we do, that is being into the Service Export Promotion Council, do expect various organizations should come up, get their registration done with SEPC to avail all the facilities that Government of India is giving to us, and should explore the global environmental market, or specifically carbon market, to meet the goal that had been set by the Government of India.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sri Dabkara and our DG, Dr. Sinha, for the valuable sessions and the presentations, very comprehensive information for all the participants and our members. So we thank all the participants for joining and asking the questions. If for the unanswered questions, you can mail to us and we will reply to you with regard from getting responses from Mr. Dabkara. So thank you again, and we wish to have you organizing more webinars in the future, and we hope to
please stay connected to everyone. I'm saying, like all the exporting community and everyone who participated, because that's how we can move ahead in this direction through our synergies. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Manish. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a nice time. Bye.